Thank you everyone for joining us here today. I'm very excited to share the stage with such esteemed and inspiring leadership at the nexus of energy and tech and AI. So with that, we will kick it off. I am here with Her Excellency Mariam Almheiri, Vice Chair and Managing Director of 2.0. Bob Blue, Chair, President, and Chief Executive Officer, Dominion Energy. Gardner Boulmay, Chief Sustainability Officer at Nscale, and Morten Wierod, President and Chief Executive Officer of ABB. The need to upgrade and expand the power system to meet the modern energy demand is not a new phenomenon. Electrification and industrial revitalization are among the key factors that are driving a surging new wave of energy demand. The addition of significant data center capacity to power artificial intelligence has made the problem more acute, but at the same time could offer opportunities to supercharge the build-out of energy infrastructure. Today, I'm joined by our group of panelists and experts to discuss the impact that AI and data centers is having on energy systems, as well as how energy systems are impacting the development of AI. So to set the stage, I think I'm going to ask some of our experts to help us define a baseline. How significant is the AI-driven energy demand challenge? Are we underestimating or overestimating the scale of electricity demand that AI will create over the next decade? Given the latest in geopolitics and energy disruption over the last couple months, what do you think is the single biggest misconception people have about power demand? And Bob, I'm going to start with you. Is this misconception exacerbated by AI?
Those are easy questions to answer. First of all, a little bit about Dominion Energy. We're headquartered in Richmond, Virginia, 90 miles down the road from here or so. We're an electric and gas utility. We serve a little over 4 million customers, 2.8 electric customers in Virginia, North Carolina, and then the remainder gas and electric customers in South Carolina, and operate a merchant nuclear plant in Millstone, Connecticut. But for purposes of this panel, I think what maybe is most relevant about us is we serve what is called Data Center Alley, not too far from here. You may have seen it if you flew into Dulles. You would have seen that, and you would have seen a solar project that we have under construction there. In our Virginia utility, about 28% of the electricity that we sell today is to data centers. To give you a sense of the scale that we have experienced in Virginia, and there's no evidence of that slowing down. Demand for electricity writ large is being driven, as you mentioned in the open, not just by large load, but also by building electrification, vehicle electrification. And so what it adds up to is a demand that we haven't seen since the years following World War II, sort of the original electrification of the United States. It almost, to me, doesn't matter whether the answer is the projection could be understated or overstated. It's a lot. I think that we're going to see a lot of demand growth. Even if it's overstated, we're still going to see a lot of demand growth. In our area that we serve with electric transmission, our top 22 peak demand days have occurred in the last year and a half. So that demand is here, it's real, and it's happening. It presents an incredible opportunities for us, for our customers. As we modernize the grid, we're going to provide better service to our customers, and we'll be able to talk. So there are a lot of misconceptions, I think, about the effect of data center demand. We'll get an opportunity to talk more about. But what I would say is there is a lot of demand coming at us. Whether the projections are overstated or understated, I think almost doesn't matter. And that presents a lot of opportunities for us to serve our customers better. So we're really looking forward to the challenges and the opportunities.
Excellent, thank you. So I also agree with that. I think demand is very high. And so Morten, from ABB's perspective, do you agree with this assessment, or what is ABB seeing in terms of demand growth?
Yeah, absolutely. We do see a strong and a rapid increase all over the world here for more power and more electricity. The world continues to go electric, and that's what we do at ABB. We are helping with electrification and automation solutions to enable here these this change to happen, because we see so many industries that is by both becoming more efficient, they need to put in more automation, but also to reduce carbon emissions, but also when we're talking about just getting more capacity online in any shape or form. There is where more electrification is needed, and that's where we come in and help. And I think one of the misconceptions you asked about, that I think was good also you said, Bob, was 22 days, you had peak days. And I think that maybe the misconception around the electricity grid is that yes, we do need more power, we need more capacity, but as important is to be able to manage those peak days, because in the end, building for the maximum peak that happens, I think it's 80 days in the United States, 80 days a year, we are really running at the maximum. The rest of the time, it's okay. And we have countries in Europe where I know that in general, it runs about 25% capacity on a daily basis. So this is the beautiful power grid. It's like a very advanced neuro system. It is something I've worked in my whole career of kind of trying to make it more reliable and stronger. And I think that's what's fascinating, because that's the investments that needs to happen now over the coming years. I'm very confident that the power grid will deal with this, but it does need more investments. It means more technology. It needs more software, so we can do better energy management and be able to deal with those fluctuations, because that is often the biggest challenge we see into the grid. It's not just having a capacity and having the average demand covered. Here it's all about handling the peaks and the maximum.
Excellent. I think also that you mentioned efficiency, Bob mentioned efficiency, and we're going to come back to that in a little bit later in the conversation. But I want to talk a little bit about this demand growth and bring it into the global context. So the build out of data centers is an inherently global trend, and global data center capacity is set to roughly double by 2030, according to some estimates. It seems this capacity will need to be concentrated in specific regions based on energy availability. We hear projections ranging from modest growth to a wholesome transformation of power demand. So against the backdrop of the war in Iran and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, Your Excellency, how might countries looking to expand energy infrastructure and their data center capabilities capitalize on the opportunity that's projected for these build-out?
Thank you, Lindsay, and great to be here with everyone. That question is very close to home, because the UAE is actually on a journey to becoming an AI native government by 2027. And I think the whole notion is about building before the demand catches up with you. So building ahead of demand, which is something that we do as a country, and it trickles down to the private sector as well. Now, the misconception is people think that AI is a technology story. It's not. It's an energy story, it's an infrastructure story, and ultimately a competitiveness story. And so we've really been looking at the whole AI economy and looking at data centers not as standalone real estate projects, but as national critical infrastructure platforms. It's the way we looked at ports and airports back in the 60s. So it's really about looking at what's coming ahead and making sure we're ready for what's coming ahead. And that notion is about building ahead of demand, integrating energy with digitization, and about creating investable platforms. So that's how we're looking at it as a country, and that's how I feel countries who are going to be getting the best out of the opportunities that lie ahead will benefit. And the problems or the challenges that lie ahead, and it's more infrastructural problems, cannot be solved by one country or one company. It really comes down to partnerships. So you need the leadership, you need the right policies, and speed is the game.
That seems like a recipe we all need to be focusing on. I hope we can all do that together. And I have to say the preparedness of the UAE, both in terms of energy and defense and AI, is something that we can all aspire to. I think the mic needs to go. We've been playing hot potato. Thank you. So with that too, thank you, Excellency. Morten, I'm going to turn back to you with the backdrop of what Her Excellency said and Bob shared earlier. What does the global supply-demand picture actually look like over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, if you look at, especially in our field, what we're looking at, the electricity demand, and if you look from 2010 to 2019, it was only just 1% a year. So not really any big increase. So, but then something happened from 2019 or 2020 onwards. Since then, we're talking about like 3% on every up to 24. And since then, we are now with predictions from IA more into the 6+% of electricity demand. This is driven, yes, by data center. We have to remember that data center only stands for about 3-4% of the electricity consumption. Steel and cement, two other industries, stands for about 7%, just to give it. By 2030, probably data center will require more than more be into that 7 category as other industries. So yes, it's a clear an addition, but it comes there are several things that happen at the same time which puts the power grid under stress. It's the aging of infrastructure, as most grids were built, post Second World War, even, in the 60s, 70s, 80s. It's only China who has a very modern power grid because that were most of the investments happening from 2000 till 2025. So it's an aging grid that needs upgrade. Then we have the energy expansion, and it's the coming both from data center, but it comes also from industrial that moves into electrical application, because electrification is cheaper and better in most applications. If we talk about movement of goods, take cranes today. In the old days were driven by hydraulics. Today is electric motion. The move from in transportation, take train from diesel to diesel electric or full electric. All these trends is happening in transportation, in buildings and industry. So that's kind of the backdrop of why we need all this electricity. And then one thing we all talked about earlier was the energy transition, and it has been a lot of renewables made available and put online since 2019. But what we also have to remember is that every solar panel, every wind turbine that has been installed in the world are just used for the additional expansion of energy. So we generate as much electricity today as we did in 2019 from coal and gas and oil. So that kind of change, so it's all the renewables, all the additional capacity we have installed has been used for the energy, the electricity expansion. And that is also what the prediction is for the main years. That's why this industry is growing very fast and kind of because you need to support the data center, but you need also everything else. So therefore, it's a good business to be in, but I also understand kind of that it also puts some challenges ahead of us for dealing with this so that we can have electricity always available and at affordable prices. These are kind of a couple of challenges that we need to deal with now in the coming years.
So lots of energy growth, electrification growth, renewables, finding ways to power each of the logistics, transportation, the industry you talked about. Gardner, can you contextualize this for us when it comes to building a data center? Since that's what we're kind of trying to baseline here. So what does the process for building a data center look like? What are some of the key energy considerations for the data centers? And then after you get us up to speed on that, can you please tell us more about the project that Nscale is working on in West Virginia? Since we've heard about Virginia, let's hear about West Virginia.
Don't forget about West Virginia. It's a very important state, and we're very excited about everything we're doing there with the Monarch Compute Campus. It's 8 gigawatts of behind-the-meter power generation. It's natural gas fired. The first 2 gigawatts come from Caterpillar reciprocating engines that are going to be in enclosures and housed and operate very quietly and efficiently using very proud Appalachian natural gas. So in terms of what's critical, it's all about power now, right? Speed is crucial at scale, and the grid can only give you so much. And in certain places like Norway, Nscale's been able to do an exceptional job of locking up that power at a reasonable price at significant scale, and we're growing a lot there. We're also growing in other operational facilities around Portugal and Europe and Iceland, and of course in West Virginia and also in Texas with our Ward County facility. So I think what makes us different and what's important in this market is the fact that you need to be able to deliver, from ground to cloud. So what I mean by that is you have to own the dirt. You have to be able to build power generation where you need it, like we are in Monarch. You need to build, own, and operate the data center. You need to operate and own the NVIDIA chips. And then you need to lease those to the hyperscalers. You kind of want to be a one-stop shop to the hyperscalers who are, trying to meet the demand of Anthropic and OpenAI and their own internal model resources, which are just growing exponentially. And if you have the ability to do that very rapidly, particularly with the behind-the-meter solution, you really have a leg up over everyone else, because most people just participate in one part of the value chain. They're just power generation, or they're just the data center. They don't own the chip. We really try to put it all together to be, again, the easy button, for lack of a better metaphor, for the hyperscalers who are looking to support the demand growth that they're seeing.
And so speaking about behind the meter, also for grid efficiency, a key component of this is supply chains. So we're going to move into that part of the conversation. Starting power demand from data centers is projected to more than double in the next 2 years and will represent a growing share of total electricity consumption. Can existing infrastructure support AI growth, which I'm kind of hearing no, but let's dive into that. Or are we approaching a fundamental redesign of energy systems? So Morten, from your perspective, what can be optimized within today's system before we start building entirely new infrastructure? Are there energy efficient technology solutions that can be implemented to make transmission, distribution, and on and off grid power infrastructure more efficient?
Yeah. Again, it's a big question, and the easy answer is yes. There is technology. Luckily, we have technology to deal with it. But right now, when we talk about these massive data centers being built, it is because we're coming up with new chips. NVIDIA's as one company are able to build up. We have racks that will require 1 megawatt per rack. That is 100 times more than what we did 3 years ago. So that's kind of the development that we're looking at. And 1 megawatt of a rack means that you're going into these 1 gigawatt or data centers. And to put that in perspective, that's like one nuclear power plant normally runs like 1.2 gigawatts. That gives a bit of the reference point to what we need when we're talking about these massive data centers. So therefore, in average, we can deal with it. That's what I said earlier. But we do need more capacity, and we need to manage the load. That means how this is being run 24/7. Because what we see also with AI data centers is different from machine learning data centers. The machine learning data centers normally run at like an 80 or 100% capacity all the time, 24/7, because what you do is training a model, training a machine. So you just want standard capacity. You can think about like a punching machine that just runs all the time. And AI data center have much big variations in load, which again puts more stress on the grid because you have these kind of waves of from a few hundred, maybe up to megawatts up to a gigawatt, and then down again. So this gives much bigger stress and pressure on an electric grid and the equipment substance there. So that will be one of the challenges I know Bob is going to deal with in the future. But there is also where we are as ABB is one of the companies that are helping utility companies, helping the data center owners to be able to have this grid stability that is needed, because nobody will accept that we have kind of blackouts or shutdown. This is where, again, technology exists to deal with it. That could be equipment like from ABB. We do what we call synchronous condensers, which are large mechanical machines that stands in the grid to give stability, and it's rotating machinery. That means that so you don't have a power shutdown like what Spain faced in April last year. This is no utility owner or no country or state want to see. So this is, as I say, the technology exists, and maybe finally also it exists by using new technology with higher energy efficiency. That is how you can reduce also the impact of some of the new capacity that we put in online, that we are able to build it as efficient as possible. That means especially around cooling. When we're looking at the different technologies that exist there, you can save up to, when we're looking at it, going to high energy efficient solution, about 20% of the energy in a data center. And the other one is around energy management, that we are able to control the power in a much better way. So, but these technologies, they do exist today, and our commitment also is to come with new technology that will help address some of these challenges.
Thank you. And you mentioned rolling blackouts and efficiency. As a native Californian, not to continue slamming my home state like we have this morning, but I grew up with those rolling blackouts. So how, I'm going to turn to you, Bob, to talk about how we handle that here in Virginia. 22 peak days in, I mean, it's only the beginning of June. That seems kind of like a lot. And before we turn to Her Excellency, where peak days are probably the norm in UAE, to what extent do large load customers pose reliability risks to the grid upon interconnection, and what steps are companies taking to mitigate these risks? Are there key technologies that can mitigate grid issues and to ease the interconnection process?
Well, I like the way Morten put in a plug for all of us to buy ABB equipment to help. And he's right, by the way. The synchronous condensers, for example, are incredibly valuable. I say that as a lawyer, not an electrical engineer, but I did learn early on in my career at Dominion, the grid needs things that spin, rotating mass, in order to maintain the stability of the system. This is an issue that at Dominion we've been responding to, taking advantage of both for some time. And it requires for us to serve the demand, some of it from data centers, some of it from other parts of the economy. It requires building infrastructure. I mean, that description is exactly right. We should be thinking about, and we've been doing this for a long time, building infrastructure. It also requires taking advantage of the capacity that's in the grid that exists today. There is a perception sometimes that we've got this kind of creaky old grid that doesn't operate very well, which is not true. Our grid, it continues to modernize, and it is much more modern and reliable than when I was a kid. And, you know, we used a rotary dial phone to call the power company to tell them our lights were out. That's not the way things work anymore. And so we advance technologies like voltage optimization that can take better advantage of the grid today, like a variety of technologies on the transmission side. But we're also going to need to build new generation and new transmission in order to serve load. It is something that our industry has done for decades. We're perfectly capable of doing it, and I'm highly confident that we will. As long as there aren't too many policy roadblocks. I mean, that we're in many ways we carry out policies of the states and the federal government, and so to the extent that, as Your Excellency described, that this is a partnership among the government and the private sector to pursue important objectives, we will certainly be able to do what we need to do. It is more complicated than it once was. Building new transmission and the outages required of existing lines, taking maintenance outages at generating stations becomes more challenging as the number of peak days continues to grow. So there's more complexity, but we also have more capacity, and more technology in order to address that. So it's really, to me, it's both. It is take advantage of the technology that we have today and that is coming, and also build new infrastructure and be smart about it.
And we will definitely come back to the policy and regulatory conversation a little bit later, but you mentioned partnerships. Her Excellency also mentioned partnerships. On the stage with us, we have the Emiratis, we have Switzerland, and we have the US. Your Excellency, can you please talk a little bit to us about how 2.0 is thinking about securing supply chains for the data center build out in the UAE, and how you are working with partners worldwide to ensure these supply chains remain reliant and cost effective?
So before I answer that question, I just want to put some context to people to understand the power demand that we will need just for data centers. So when you were saying
in UAE,
double, no, globally.
Globally.
So when we're saying double the global data center electricity consumption, you got to think about it this way. So I did the calculation yesterday. New York City consumes about 50 terawatt hours of electricity per year. So what we actually need in the next 5 years is 2 New York City worth of electricity every year for the next 5 years. So just to give you some context on what data center consumption, and this is only data centers, right? There's also the whole industrial advancement. There's the electrification of vehicles. So the electricity demand is huge. So when we think of now what we have to do in the future with partners, these challenges are so big. You have on the one side the power generation, but the more important side is the systems approach we need in energy and permitting and connectivity and supply chains, critical metals and minerals. It all comes as a partnership ecosystem that we have to build. Now, 2.0 is an investment platform, global investment platform. We are investing in energy and infrastructure and in consumer. And since we're here at the Global Energy Forum, I'll dive into the energy space. And this is E.0. That's our energy platform. And what we've done, Lindsay, is we've looked at where are going to be the bottlenecks in the future. Copper supply is going to be a bottleneck. So E.0 is looking in, and we're mining copper. We've got a partnership with the government in Zambia and looking at coming out at about 240,000 tons per annum of copper. Then we look at cables, transformers, UPSs. These are all going to be bottlenecks. We're also investing in manufacturing these items. Then we're looking at power generation, solar. We're going big in India. We're going big in the US. Actually, we've just signed an agreement with Traverse Midstream Partners. It's a $2.25 billion acquisition.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. And this is our exposure to a critical natural gas pipeline that runs across 4 US states into Canada. Why is this important? Again, because we understand that infrastructure and bringing energy to where it's needed is as important as the data centers itself. And so this is what we're about. We're about building resilient ecosystems. That's what E.0 is doing in the energy and infrastructure space. And this first move in the acquisition of Traverse is our first big step into the energy market here in the US. And the overarching theme, of course, the US-UAE partnership, with the UAE committing $1.4 trillion into this partnership. This is a step in that direction, with many more with all our partners. I think you all have heard of XRG, Mubadala. This is the Abu Dhabi Inc. We all work together with our partners because, again, this challenge that we have before us, the AI economy, needs partners to work together.
Worldwide, I think.
Yes.
Unfortunately, a lot of the components necessary come from places that are very hard to get to. So
Absolutely.
having strategic partnerships to help ease evacuation routes and access is paramount.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that example. And so turning a little bit to cost allocation, there's been a significant discussion of concerns that average ratepayers are footing the bill of AI data centers. I think we touched on this a little bit in the opening panel today. So Bob, is there something you're observing in the Dominion Energy service territory? What has been the net effect of data centers on energy rates, and how is Dominion Energy taking action to ensure data centers pay their fair share in accordance with overarching principles like the Ratepayer Protection Pledge?
What better way to get a conference excited than talk about cost allocation and a utility proceeding?
I'm pumped.
But actually, the fact that it has become the question was, are we observing it? And we're observing the debate, and it gets very much oversimplified. The oversimplification is, well, electricity rates are going up in some places and data centers are building, so one must be causing the other. Let's have a big fight about it. The utility commissions from the beginning of rate cases have allocated costs across classes. In every utility rate case, every class claims that they are subsidizing the other class. That has happened from the beginning of regulatory time, I believe. But this is what regulators do. And in the case of Virginia and in a number of other states, the regulators have established a large load class that is, at least in Virginia, almost exclusively data centers. That class will have a tariff structure, and now we're getting really exciting when we start about tariff structures, but with a 14-year contract minimum and essentially take-or-pay contracts. There have been, again, Virginia is the state where at least our utility sells more electricity to data centers than any other. Our rates are well below the national average, have been for a long time. Two independent studies, one by the Virginia legislature and one by Berkeley National Labs, showed that as data center consumption increased in Virginia, residential rates were below the rate of inflation, below the rates in other states. But it's now taken me, 3 minutes to describe that, and a newspaper headline doesn't have 3 minutes. So we need to do a better job of explaining that just because two things are happening at the same time doesn't mean that one is causing the other. And we need to make sure, and I think there is universal agreement among utilities and among data centers, that those large load users pay their fair share. I mean, I think they're very clear about that. And we certainly believe that. And state regulators in every state, certainly in Virginia where we operate, will be paying very close attention to this going forward to make sure that there isn't a subsidization of data centers by residential customers. It can be done. It's being done effectively right now. It's just there's sort of a narrative that's developed that is challenging to overcome, understandably so, and it's the responsibility of policymakers, of companies that are in the space to lay out the facts. People can come to their own conclusions, but they should at least understand what's really going on.
Well, as a resident of Virginia, personally, thank you for making sure our rates stay reasonably low. But
and your lights stay on. We'll make sure that too.
Thank you, especially during the peak days. But I in that term too, a lot of the hyperscalers, there's a lot, everyone needs to be investment grade. There's talks about credit support, different ways of being able to move capital for the build out. So Gardner, can you please contextualize this for us a little bit again? How does Nscale's business model function, and what are some of the other business models available?
So Nscale is, like I mentioned before, really focused on kind of ground to cloud, making a one-stop shop for the hyperscalers to be able to lease effectively under long-term contracts access to NVIDIA chips, whether that be Grace Blackwell's, Vera Rubin's, et cetera. So we're a strong partner with NVIDIA, of course, as you would imagine. They're an investor in the company. And our business model is really trying to make it simple for customers to be able to get to gigawatts of scale of these chips very rapidly. And so as Bob mentioned, I think, the regulated utilities are doing a great job, Dominion in particular, of trying to make sure that load balancing and cost allocation is done properly. And that's one approach, a very common approach for most data centers globally. But another approach is behind the meter, right? And behind the meter means you're effectively running a microgrid. You're not connected to the utility. You're not straining the grid and in heavy load days. You're not affecting ratepayers' rates. The hyperscaler alone is paying the bills of the power generation on the facility. And that can be a great solution to bring gigawatts online quickly until the grid is able to connect. And then to the extent that there is an opportunity to connect to the grid, you're never taking power off the grid. You're never affecting rates. You're only adding capacity to the grid, particularly in colder weather moments, and PJM gets strained in those moments. And that's when we'll have excess capacity for our West Virginia facility in particular. But our business model is, GPU as a service. It's effectively allowing the hyperscalers to be able to meet the demand of, their own large language models and those components for Anthropic, OpenAI, et cetera, by using us as a neocloud provider.
And speaking of behind the meter generation, Morten, on-site optimization can reduce a data center's grid draw. So how far can that model scale before it creates coordination problems for grid operators?
Yeah, and in general, I do understand also kind of to get going, it makes sense to do on-site power generation. I think though, maybe talking more as an electrical engineer, long term, it does make sense to be online on the grid because the investment and keeping for general support for the society to keep a modernized grid running well, it is better the more user you have, the more kind of user it is to divide the fixed cost. So long term, I do think that it makes sense to get everything connected back on the grid, because that is what would make, as I say, from a society point of view, which would be the best case. And that I know that that is probably also the target, as I understand, for Nscale. And then I think here is for us when we're looking at it is how can we use technology to reduce both the build cost but also the consumption and deal with bottlenecks, because there will be bottlenecks in this situation. We're talking about mentioned already, we hear about kind of the from gas turbines, power transformers, down to the equipment that we make, but also electricians in the end to be able to do that job. So what kind of two things we are doing, looking at how can we build more into a factory in modular design instead of building on site, which always take longer time and is more expensive. So you can do things faster and better in a factory environment. So in modular units that is just being kind of deployed at site and being connected. So that's one thing you do. And the other one that we are, as ABB, is also helping in a coalition with others in the industry, creating also the Career Electric, which is a coalition of companies going together. We committed in starting in the state of North Carolina. So thank you also there to Governor Stein and his team. I've been able to set this up to be able to dedicate for the next 10 years. We will educate 25,000 into electric workforce, so to say, who can deal with it, because electricians will be one of the key bottlenecks in our industry. So we start in North Carolina, but we are also looking for kind of doing this nationwide together with other states. So there will be bottlenecks, but it's all about how can you move those around and address them a bit early, so we're not kind of stuck, because I would say also workforce will be one of the key issues in the coming years.
Speaking of mobilizing capital, in a past life, I worked on building power plants for behind-the-meter power for data centers, and I learned that welders and electricians in Texas are making about $200,000 a year. So maybe if moderating doesn't pan out for me, I can learn a thing or two. But Your Excellency, talking about from an investment perspective, what makes energy infrastructure attractive or unattractive to long-term institutional investors?
So I think from an investor lens, what's interesting with the energy infrastructure is that it's at the intersection of three major shifts: electrification, digitization, and energy security. Now, we're very much about patient capital, long-term investments. So when we look at the energy infrastructure, it's very attractive because it's all about long-term contracts. It's about regulated cash flow, and that's kind of like where the Traverse Midstream acquisition sits. On the risk side, it's the speed of execution. And this is where we're always talking about there's a whole systems approach to this. So it's about the grid, it's about the permitting, it's about getting the partners, it's about is your equipment able to come on time? It's a whole array of factors that come into that. So why we're now going strong in the US market is because it's becoming a very attractive landscape for energy infrastructure. And so this is how we're looking at the partnership that we have. There's also a partnership happening in the UAE, which is the Stargate project. Again, I think there's been a lot of the news about how fast that's being developed, because we understand that the name of the game is speed of execution. And so we've really put that into, or classified that as a critical national priority infrastructure that has to be built at lightning speed. So this is how we look at things from an investor point of view. It's got to be the 5 factors that I keep thinking about is the connectivity, the finance, the permitting, the supply chain, and having the right partners.
And I think we've touched on 4 of those today in the conversation. One we have not yet talked about is policymaking, some of the regulatory framework. So I think, Bob, we're going to put you on the hot seat here a little bit. I know that the current administration has undertaken a lot of regulatory and policy changes to speed up a lot of the build out that AI demand is putting on the requirements for power generation and electrification. Have you seen examples of where industry has achieved both affordability and reliability, and that we can use as a metric for our current build out? And then separately, do you see some kind of a bipartisan framework that could help to lubricate the growth that we need to see, not only in the United States, but with our partners as well?
Yeah, I think Morten described it well. On affordability and reliability can go very much hand in hand. As you build out the infrastructure to serve a growing base of customers, you're spreading the fixed costs out over a larger number of megawatt hours. And I would modestly say Dominion Energy is an example of a reliable, or maybe immodestly, reliability and affordability. I already discussed the fact that our rates are below national averages while we have done a substantial amount of investing on behalf of data centers. Permitting reform, though, will be critical to moving forward, and not relaxing rules. The permitting process should be rigorous, but it should have a beginning and it should have an end. And those two things shouldn't be too far apart from each other. There are examples at Dominion of transmission projects that are of a relatively short, one in particular, short distance transmission line needed because we were retiring a fossil asset, an aging coal plant. And the permitting process took years. The permit that had been issued was invalidated by a court after the line had been energized, thank goodness. And the permitting process is still going on for a line that we've built and energized 7 years ago, and the permitting process isn't done yet. That seems not logical, and there have to be ways for different agencies to coordinate better, to have parallel reviews rather than sequential reviews, to make sure that agencies are focused on their specific area of expertise, not an expertise that really should be somewhere else. This doesn't have to be hard. It can be very rigorous, but can be done more effectively than I think we're doing it today. And we're looking forward to continued movement. I know I only know what I read in the paper, but it seems like there have been good conversations on a bipartisan basis in the Senate. We're optimistic that there will be opportunities for us to achieve a rigorous and yet time-limited permitting process to allow this infrastructure ultimately to get built. And the last thing I'd say, it's incumbent on people building the infrastructure to realize we've got to communicate well, because people deserve an opportunity to participate in the process and say their piece. And so we need to be there upfront, transparent, honest from the get-go. And in return, what we would like is a fair and logical process to get to the end.
I think that's a delicate balance, but with strong partnerships and communication, hopefully that will be successful for all of us, inshallah. We only have a couple minutes left, so I want to close us out with a lightning round. I'm going to ask you to please complete this sentence. The biggest obstacle to powering the AI economy is blank. So, Gardner, I'm going to start with you.
So I'll be immodest as well. I think fundamentally the biggest obstacle is being able to get gigawatts of power online very rapidly. And there are very few companies that can do that at scale. And so we've chosen to crack that nut with both on-grid wherever possible, but also behind-the-meter solutions that really are a differentiator for us. But it's really all about power at scale quickly.
Morten.
To finish the sentence, my word was workforce.
That's a good. You talked about the electricians, the welders. Where else are you seeing gaps in the workforce?
No, it's even on contractors to be able to build. So it's not getting everything connected. So I think that's one of the challenges we see in so many markets. Will be short on skilled workforce, and that's as I gave you the example also where we're stepping up as a company and participating together with a private, public, and government initiative that we can help address this challenge as well.
Okay, great. We have speed, scale, workforce. Bob.
I would say workforce and policy consensus, just consensus on what objectives we're trying to achieve here.
Okay, we're in Washington, so everyone, policy consensus. Your Excellency, we're going to finish with you.
I would say speed of execution in a nutshell. AI is moving at digital speed, but energy infrastructure is moving at physical infrastructure speed. The gap is too big. We cannot wait 7 to 10 years for permitting to be done. So I would say speed of execution.
Speed of execution. Okay, well, with that, I'm going to close out our panel. Thank you to my excellent panelists for joining us today. I had a great time and I enjoyed the conversation. So.